You don't know who you're messing with. I muttered under my breath as I watched her march across the yard with that condescending grin on her face. Maggie Harris, the self-appointed queen of Willowbrook Estates. A woman who thought she could control everyone and everything, just because she ran the HOA. But what she didn't know, I owned the land she was standing on. It was time to show her what happens when you push the wrong person. My name is Ethan Walker, and this lakeside cabin? It's my legacy, handed down through generations. My grandfather, a tough-as-nails man who fought in the Korean War, built this cabin back in the 60s. Every inch of this land has a memory attached to it, from family barbecues to quiet mornings spent fishing by the dock. It was more than just property to me, it was home. But Maggie Harris didn't see it that way. Maggie and the HOA had been a thorn in my side for months, making up rules and regulations that didn't apply to me. They tried to bully me into complying with their ridiculous demands, but I wasn't backing down. Then came the day I walked out onto the porch, ready for a peaceful afternoon, only to see her standing at the edge of the yard, phone pressed to her ear like she was some sort of authority figure. She was calling 911. For what? For me being on my own property? You need to leave, Ethan, she shouted across the yard. This cabin is a hazard to the neighborhood. We're calling the cops to have you removed. I couldn't believe it. The audacity. Maggie had been pushing her weight around for far too long, but now she had gone too far. I stepped forward, slowly. I'd had enough of this woman thinking she could run my life, dictate what I did with my own property. I watched as she continued to talk into her phone, not realizing that I was the one who held the cards. Because here's what Maggie didn't know. While she was busy making calls, she had no idea that I wasn't just the owner of this cabin. I was also her landlord. The property she stood on, the one she'd been trying to seize with her endless demands, was mine. And she had no idea. I wasn't just another local resident who could be pushed around. No, I had power. Legal power. The kind that could make her regret ever crossing me. As Maggie continued her tirade into the phone, I turned and walked inside. I didn't need to say anything more. I didn't need to argue. It was time for her to learn the hard way what happens when you mess with the wrong person. I picked up the phone, dialed my lawyer, and started laying the groundwork for what would become a legal battle she would never see coming. Maggie Harris had just called 911 to try and kick me out of my own cabin. But what she didn't know was that I wasn't just any ordinary neighbor. I was the one who held the deed to this land, and I was about to use that power to make sure she learned a valuable lesson. The kind that involved her losing everything she thought she controlled. It was hard to believe that just an hour ago, Maggie Harris had been standing on my lawn, demanding that I leave my own property. The nerve of her. As I sat in the quiet of my lakeside cabin, the weight of the situation settled in. I'd been dealing with Maggie and the HOA for months, but this time, things were different. This time, she'd crossed a line. She had no idea what she was up against. I could feel the anger bubbling inside me, but I kept it in check. I knew that reacting emotionally would only give her the upper hand. So I focused. I had a plan now, one that would make sure she would never try to pull something like this again. I reached for the phone and dialed my lawyer's number. Ethan, he said after a few rings. What's going on? You sound like you're in a storm. You could say that, I replied, trying to keep my voice calm. I need you to look into some things for me. I've got a situation with Maggie Harris and the HOA. My lawyer, a no-nonsense guy named Ben, didn't waste time. What happened this time? She called 911, trying to get me kicked out of my own cabin. She's acting like she owns the place. I paused for a moment, taking a breath. But the thing is, she doesn't. I do. And I'm her landlord. There was a silence on the other end of the line before Ben spoke again, his voice sharper now. You've got her by the throat, Ethan. That's a pretty big trump card. Let's see how she likes the tables being turned. I felt a sense of relief. Ben knew exactly what to do. He was the kind of lawyer who didn't back down, and with the power I held over Maggie, I knew she was in for a rude awakening. As soon as I hung up, I walked outside to the porch, looking out at the lake. The sun was beginning to set, casting a golden light across the water. It was peaceful, serene, and exactly why I fought so hard to keep this place. Maggie didn't understand that. She didn't understand what it meant to own land, to have a legacy, to have something that was yours and yours alone. I knew I wasn't the first person Maggie had tried to bully, and I sure as hell wouldn't be the last. But this time, things were going to be different. I wasn't going to let her win. I'd spent my life building something for my family. The cabin, the land, it was a part of me. And I wasn't about to let some woman with too much time on her hands take it away. I could almost hear her now, her voice high and demanding, as she tried to use her position as HOA president to control me. But I wasn't just any homeowner. I wasn't a guy she could push around. I had rights, and I was about to use them. I walked back inside, grabbing the documents from the drawer. I was ready to make my move. It wasn't just about taking back control of the cabin. It was about sending a message. Maggie Harris was about to learn the hard way that some people don't let bullies win. Not when they have the law on their side. The next morning, I woke up with a sense of calm I hadn't felt in weeks. The weight of the previous day's chaos had shifted from a burden to an opportunity. I grabbed a cup of coffee and sat by the window, the sun just beginning to rise over the lake. The water shimmered, reflecting the colors of the sky. It was quiet, peaceful, everything I loved about this place. And now, Maggie Harris had made the mistake of underestimating me. I wasn't just going to let this slide. She had made a serious miscalculation when she decided to push me around. Maggie thought she could use her position as HOA president to control me, to bully me off my own property, but she didn't know who she was dealing with. I wasn't some clueless landowner who didn't understand the rules. I knew exactly what I was doing, and I knew exactly how to turn this situation in my favor. I wasn't just a guy who owned a cabin on the lake. I was the one with the deed, the one with the legal authority. And that made all the difference. I walked over to my desk, pulling out the documents I had gathered the night before. My fingers ran over the papers, familiarizing myself with the details. I had all the information I needed, but it was time to take action. I made the call. My lawyer, Ben, picked up right away. "Ethan," he said, sounding confident. "What's the plan?" "It's time to make Maggie realize that she's been playing a dangerous game," I replied. "I want you to send her an official letter. Something formal. Let her know I'm her landlord, and this cabin is my property. I don't want any more nonsense. I want her to understand that she's not in control here." Ben paused, clearly considering my words. "Got it. I'll get on it right away. We'll make sure she knows who's running the show." I hung up the phone, feeling a sense of relief wash over me. The legal side of things was taken care of. Now it was just a matter of waiting for Maggie's reaction. But I wasn't going to sit around and wait idly. I had spent too much time worrying about her and her HOA's constant interference in my life. It was time to take back control. Later that afternoon, I got a call from Ben. "Ethan, the letter's been sent." I made sure it was clear and to the point. "It's only a matter of time before Maggie gets it." "Good," I said, leaning back in my chair. "Let's see how she responds. I'm done playing by her rules." The days passed slowly, but the tension in the air was palpable. Maggie hadn't said a word to me since the 911 call, but I could feel her, simmering beneath the surface. I wasn't going to let her win. This was my property, my cabin. It wasn't just a piece of land, it was my legacy. And I wasn't going to let anyone, not even someone as powerful as Maggie Harris, take that from me. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of my phone ringing. I glanced at the clock, 7:30 a.m. It was early, but I wasn't surprised. I had a feeling today would be the day things would change. I answered the phone, expecting Ben, but it was a voice I recognized all too well. "Ethan," Maggie's voice came through, dripping with false sweetness. "I received your letter. But let's be clear, I don't take kindly to threats." My stomach tightened, but I kept my voice steady. "Maggie, this isn't a threat. This is a fact. I own the land you're standing on. I am your landlord. And I expect you to respect my property and my rights." There was a pause on the other end, then a soft laugh. "Oh, I respect your rights, all right," she said, her voice suddenly cold. "But you're not going to scare me off with some legal mumbo-jumbo. You're just a man with a cabin, Ethan. I run this neighborhood. You might own that land, but this community belongs to me, and I will not back down." I could hear the arrogance in her voice, the same arrogance that had gotten her into this mess in the first place. Maggie didn't understand power, real power. She thought because she was HOA president, she could push people around. But she wasn't dealing with just anyone. I wasn't going to let her run my life anymore. "I'm not trying to scare you, Maggie," I replied, my tone calm but firm. "But I am done playing by your rules. I'm not asking you to back down. I'm telling you, if you keep interfering with my property, there will be legal consequences. You've pushed too far, and now it's time to stop." Her silence lasted a few seconds, and I knew she was processing the weight of my words. Finally, she spoke, this time with a forced calm. Fine, we'll see about that. But don't think you're going to get away with this. She hung up without another word, leaving me with a sense of certainty. This wasn't over, but it was the beginning of the end for Maggie. I set the phone down and stared out the window at the calm water. For a moment, everything felt right again. But I knew the battle wasn't over yet. Maggie had shown her hand. She was too stubborn to back down, but that was exactly what I needed. It was time to make her realize that her position in the HOA meant nothing when it came to real authority. My lawyer was right. Maggie had been playing a dangerous game, thinking she could push me around. But now, I had all the leverage. I wasn't going to let her win. I wasn't going to let anyone take away what I had worked so hard for. The phone call might have ended, but my plan was just beginning. Maggie had made the mistake of underestimating me. Now, she would pay the price. The following days were a strange mix of calm and tension. Maggie had backed off, but I knew it wouldn't last long. She wasn't the type of person to take a step back without a fight. I spent the next few days at the cabin, taking care of small repairs and keeping to myself. The sound of the wind through the trees, the gentle ripples on the lake. It was the kind of peace I needed to focus. I wasn't going to let this woman take over my life, and I wasn't going to let her think she could control me. I knew that when it came to people like Maggie, you had to hit them where it hurt. And right now, she was vulnerable. The HOA was her kingdom, and if I could take that from her, she would be nothing. I wasn't about to go down without a fight. On the fourth day after the call, I received a letter from Maggie's lawyer. It was as arrogant as I expected. The letter demanded that I cease and desist from any further actions, threatening legal consequences if I didn't back off. It was a standard tactic, one meant to intimidate. But it didn't intimidate me. I knew exactly what I had. I picked up my phone and dialed Ben. "Hey, Ben," I said when he answered. "I just got a letter from Maggie's lawyer. Looks like she's trying to escalate things. I need to know how to respond." Ben's voice was calm and measured. "Don't worry about it. Let me take care of it. We'll draft a response that makes it clear you're not backing down. We'll hit her with some facts she won't be able to ignore." I nodded, feeling a sense of confidence. Maggie had no idea what she was up against. Her threats didn't scare me, and neither did her lawyer's letter. I had the law on my side. "Thanks, Ben," I said. "Just make sure it's clear. This is my land, my property. I'm not going to let her bully me out of it." "Got it. I'll get on it right away. You just sit tight and let me handle this. We'll make sure she understands her position." After the call, I sat back in my chair, looking out at the lake again. The water was still, reflecting the clear blue sky above. It felt almost surreal that Maggie thought she could take it all away. This was my family's land, passed down from generation to generation. I wasn't going to let her turn it into her playground. The following week, I received Ben's response to Maggie's lawyer. It was a well-crafted letter, one that laid out all the facts and made it clear that I wasn't going to be intimidated. Ben had used legal language that Maggie's lawyer couldn't ignore, including references to the property deed and my rights as the rightful owner. It was airtight. When I read it, I felt a sense of satisfaction. Maggie had made a huge mistake, and now, it was time for her to face the consequences. I sent the letter off, confident that it would make her think twice before trying anything further. But I knew this wasn't over. Maggie had made it personal. She had tried to push me off my own land. And when someone does that, there's no turning back. I was ready for whatever came next. Maggie had been bold enough to call 911 on me, to try and run me out of my own cabin. But now, she had no idea how much power I was really holding. She thought she could control the neighborhood, but she didn't realize the one thing she couldn't control, the truth. The days that followed were tense, but strangely quiet. I waited, knowing Maggie wouldn't just walk away. I had sent the letter, but I could feel her simmering, plotting her next move. It wasn't like her to back down. But she had no idea that what she was dealing with was far beyond the petty disputes of an HOA president. As much as she wanted to run the neighborhood, she didn't understand the power of ownership. My cabin, my land. This was my family's heritage. I wasn't going to let anyone take that from me, no matter how much money or influence they thought they had. I had nothing left to prove to her. I had already made my move. Maggie's silence only made me more certain that she was preparing something, waiting for the right moment to retaliate. But I wasn't going to let her make the first move again. I had learned something from the military. Sometimes, the best strategy is to let your opponent think they have the upper hand. That way, when you make your move, it hits harder. That's exactly what I did. I stayed quiet, kept to my routine, and let Maggie stew in her own arrogance. It was 2 days later when I received a call from Ben. "Ethan," he said, his voice calm, but with an edge of excitement. "You're not going to believe this. Maggie's lawyer just called me. Apparently, she's planning to sue you for defamation." I raised an eyebrow, amused by the thought. Defamation? For what? Ben laughed, clearly enjoying the absurdity of it all. "She claims that your letter was an attack on her character and her position in the HOA, that it was a deliberate attempt to harm her reputation. She's trying to make it look like you're the one causing trouble." I shook my head, a chuckle escaping my lips. "That's rich. She's the one who tried to kick me off my own land, and now she's playing the victim." "Exactly," Ben said, clearly pleased with the situation. "And here's the kicker. She's demanding damages. She thinks she can intimidate you into backing down." "Not going to happen," I replied firmly. "Send her another letter. This time, I want her to understand that she's wasting her time. Tell her I'm not afraid of a legal battle. I've got all the proof I need, and I'm ready to fight this. She can try to play her games, but I'm not going anywhere." Ben hesitated for a moment before responding. "Are you sure? This could escalate things even further." I looked out at the lake, the calm waters reflecting the clear sky, the peace that had always been there. "I'm sure. Maggie crossed the line when she called 911 and tried to run me out of my own home. If she wants to make this personal, then fine. Let's make it a fight she'll never forget." Ben was quiet for a moment. Then he spoke with a tone of approval. "All right, I'll take care of it. We'll make sure she knows she's out of her depth. You just stay calm, Ethan. You've got this." As I hung up the phone, I felt a sense of clarity wash over me. Maggie thought she could intimidate me, that she could use her position to force me out. But she didn't realize who she was dealing with. This wasn't just some guy she could bully into submission. I wasn't going anywhere. And soon, she would learn that the hard way. It had been a week since I last spoke to Maggie, and things had settled into an uncomfortable calm. She hadn't responded to the letter Ben sent, but I knew it was only a matter of time before she would try something again. Her pride was too big for her to just walk away. I was sitting on the porch one afternoon, watching the sunlight reflect off the water when my phone rang. It was Ben. "Ethan, you're not going to believe this," he said, his voice filled with disbelief. "Maggie's lawyer just called. She's not backing down. In fact, she's doubling down." I sat up straight, a wave of frustration hitting me. Doubling down? What's she doing now? "She's filed a formal complaint with the HOA board, claiming that your property rights are being violated. She's trying to turn the whole neighborhood against you. She's calling you a disruptive influence." I laughed bitterly. Disruptive influence? She's the one trying to steal my property, and now she's playing the victim? "Yeah, that's exactly what she's doing," Ben said, clearly as frustrated as I was. "She's trying to make it look like you're the problem, hoping the HOA board will side with her. She's also threatening to take you to court over the defamation claim." I shook my head, staring out at the water. "She's making a huge mistake. You know that, right?" Ben sighed. "I do, but we've got to act fast. We can't let her paint you as the bad guy. I'm drafting another letter. We'll make sure the HOA knows the truth about what's really going on." "Good. Let her know that I'm not backing down. I've got everything I need to prove I'm in the right. And I'm not going to let her destroy everything my family has worked for." Ben was quiet for a moment before replying. "I'm on it. But this is going to get messy. Be prepared for a fight." I took a deep breath. "I'm ready. She doesn't know what she's up against." I hung up the phone, but the frustration and anger didn't go away. Maggie had underestimated me, and now she was trying to drag the entire neighborhood into her mess. She was determined to turn this into a full-blown fight, and I was ready to give her one. But I wasn't going to just let her do whatever she wanted. I wasn't going to let her tear my life apart because of her need for control. The next morning, I sat at my desk, reviewing the property deed once again, making sure I had everything lined up. Ben's letter would be ready soon, and I was going to make sure Maggie knew exactly what kind of fight she was starting. She had no idea that this was a battle she wasn't going to win. The more she pushed, the more I would push back. I had the law, I had the land, and I had the truth on my side. Maggie might have thought she was the one in control, but I was about to show her just how wrong she was. The next few days felt like a storm was brewing. I could sense the tension in the air, and I knew that Maggie wouldn't stop until she had dragged this out as far as she could. But this time, I wasn't going to let her dictate the terms. I sat at my desk, going over the details of the situation one last time. The letter Ben had drafted was perfect. It laid out the facts in a way that couldn't be ignored, with enough legal weight to back it up. I was ready for whatever Maggie had planned next. The phone rang, pulling me out of my thoughts. It was Ben. Ethan, I just got off the phone with the HOA board. Maggie's been pushing hard, and she's trying to rally them against you. She's even talking about forcing a vote to have you removed from the neighborhood. I leaned back in my chair, clenching my fists. She's not wasting any time, huh? Nope. She's desperate, and she's using everything she's got. But listen, I told them that we'll fight back. I made sure they understood that you've got the legal right to be there, and they can't just kick you out. Good, I said, my voice steady. This isn't just about the cabin anymore. It's about standing my ground and making sure she knows she can't run my life. We're not backing down. Ben hesitated for a moment before continuing. She's planning to bring in outside support, possibly even involving the media. If this gets out of hand, it could escalate quickly. I sighed, feeling the weight of the situation. I've already been through enough of her games. I'm not letting her get away with this. If the media gets involved, so be it. Let them see who's really in the wrong here. I'll be ready, Ben said firmly. But this could get complicated. Be prepared for things to get messy. I could feel the tension building in my chest, but I knew I had to stay calm. Maggie had pushed me to this point, and I wasn't going to back down. The next day, I got another letter from the HOA. It was a formal notification of a hearing scheduled for the following week. Maggie was trying to force the issue, putting everything on the line to make it look like she was in the right. She even had the audacity to include a list of accusations, claiming I had been disruptive and uncooperative in my dealings with the neighborhood. I stared at the letter, shaking my head. She really thought she could turn this around on me. She thought I would just cave under pressure? Not a chance. I stood up, pacing across the room. I was ready for this. I'd been through enough to know that sometimes you had to make your own luck. And I wasn't going to let Maggie Harris walk all over me. The clock was ticking, and the hearing was just days away. But I wasn't worried. I had all the facts on my side. I had the legal backing. And soon, Maggie would learn the hard way that you don't mess with someone who has nothing left to lose. The hearing was set for the following Monday. I knew this was the moment everything would change. I had the facts, I had the legal support, and most importantly, I had the truth. Maggie, on the other hand, had nothing but arrogance and a desperate need to control everything. The morning of the hearing, I woke up early. I sat in the kitchen, sipping my coffee, trying to stay calm. It wasn't just about the cabin anymore. It was about sending a message. It was about showing Maggie that she couldn't push people around just because she held some position of power in the HOA. As I sat there, thinking about everything that had led up to this point, I realized just how much I had learned over the past few weeks. I had been tested, my patience, my resolve, my ability to stand firm in the face of intimidation. And now, it was time to show Maggie that I was not someone she could intimidate. When I arrived at the hearing, the room was already filled with people. I could see Maggie sitting at the front, her usual smug expression plastered on her face. She had brought some of the other HOA board members with her, all of them sitting there like they were ready to take me down. I walked in, holding my head high, my lawyer Ben at my side. I didn't flinch. This was my fight, and I was ready. The hearing began, and I sat quietly, listening as Maggie's lawyer presented their case. They accused me of causing disruptions, of being unreasonable, of not cooperating with the HOA's community standards. I knew this was coming. I had already prepared for it. When it was my turn to speak, I stood up slowly, looking around the room at the faces of the board members. I could feel their eyes on me, but I didn't let it faze me. I've been a part of this community for years. I started, my voice steady but strong. This land has been in my family for generations. It's not just a property to me, it's a legacy. And I won't stand by while someone tries to take that from me. I could see Maggie shifting uncomfortably in her seat. She wasn't used to being challenged. Like this. I've complied with every reasonable request from the HOA, I continued. But when it comes to trying to force me out of my own home, that's where I draw the line. This isn't about community standards. This is about control. I turned to the board members, making sure they understood the weight of my words. I own this land. I'm not going anywhere. And I won't allow anyone, no matter what position they hold, to use their power to try to bully me into submission. There was a moment of silence. Maggie's lawyer opened his mouth, but before he could say anything, Ben stood up and began presenting the evidence. We had everything. Documents proving my legal ownership, the original deeds, the letters showing that Maggie had crossed the line. We had the facts, and the board couldn't ignore them. The next few hours were a blur of legal jargon and back-and-forth arguments. But in the end, it became clear the board had no grounds to side with Maggie. Her claims were baseless, and it was obvious to everyone in the room that she had overstepped. When the hearing finally adjourned, the board members announced their decision. They ruled in my favor. Maggie's attempts to seize control of my property were over. I couldn't help but feel a sense of relief wash over me. It was finally done. Maggie had lost. She had played her hand, and now she had nothing left. I turned to Ben, who gave me a satisfied smile. "You did it," he said. I nodded, my mind still processing everything that had happened. But I knew one thing for sure. This wasn't just a victory for me. It was a message to Maggie and to anyone else who thought they could push people around just because they had power. You mess with the wrong person, and you'll learn what happens when someone stands their ground.